The top job at Portland's Parks and Recreation sat empty for months. But there is new leadership in Adena Long, a native New Yorker who brings decades of experience in New York City to the West Coast. Today, she joins us to talk about her vision for Portland's Parks and Rec as the Bureau faces a major deficit and Portlanders fight to save beloved community centers from budget cuts. From KGW News, this is Straight Talk with Laurel Porter.
Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Laurel Porter. Thank you for joining us. Whether you're a newcomer to the Portland area or your roots go back generations, our parks are a big part of what so many of us love about this place we call home. Whether it's Tom McCall Waterfront Park, Washington Park, our pools and community centers, bicycle trails, or the world's smallest park, Mill Ends Park, our parks give life and beauty to the city. They connect us. And now the department charged with managing this treasure has new leadership. Commissioner Nick Fish took over responsibility for the Parks and Recreation Bureau last fall, and soon after he started a nationwide search for a new parks director. He found her in New York City. Adena Long takes over during a challenging time as the Parks Bureau faces a $6.2 million budget shortfall. Tonight, we find out more about the new director and her vision for Portland Parks. Welcome to my guest, Portland Parks and Recreation Director Adena Long. Thanks for joining us. Great to have you here on Straight Talk.
Thank you for having me, Laurel.
You've been here about 2 months. What are your first impressions of Portland?
Well, Portland is living up to its own stereotypes. They're polite, they're progressive, and the city's wonderful. It feels like a very small, big town. Big city, rather.
And what do you think of our park system?
Well, the Portland park system is world-renowned, and although it's a bit smaller than what I'm used to, I'm still trying to get used to it. I've trying to learn the lay of the land, both figuratively and literally. In fact, today I was able to take a lovely 3-hour walk of all the downtown parks with some of the staff. And so I'm really getting to learn all of the parks as I learn my new job.
Have you felt welcomed in the community?
Welcomed. Everyone has been so accommodating and so enthusiastic about my coming on board, and it's really made the transition a lot easier.
Well, let's let our viewers know a little bit more about your background. Adena Long is a native New Yorker. She began her New York City Parks career as a seasonal urban park ranger in 1997. She moved up the ranks and in 2010 became the first woman and youngest ever to serve as Parks Borough Commissioner for Staten Island. In 2018, she was recognized as Manager of the Year for New York City Parks. She served as Deputy Commissioner for the Urban Park Service and Public Programs since 2016. She earned her bachelor's degree from the School of Agriculture and Natural Resources at the University of Connecticut and earned her Master of Science in Nonprofit Management from the Milano School of Management and Urban Policy at the New School. She was named the new Portland Parks and Recreation Director in February of this year. And I was talking with Commissioner Fish, and he is just thrilled to have you here. He's the head of the Bureau, and he said you're a rock star. So why, you were like the #2 person in the #1 park system in the country, why did you give all that up to come to Portland?
Well, it's the story is multifaceted. First of all, I was pursued, and who doesn't want to be pursued, right? Being told that you're wanted. I had been in New York City my entire life. I've never lived anywhere else except for my 4 years in college. And I figured, and I always thought of myself as being an adventurous type. And when the offer was there, when the offer was there, I said, you know what, you've not been adventurous. And so that was a part of it. The other part is, if not now, when, right? I felt I was getting of a certain age that if I were to want to make that move later on, I might not be as attractive in the industry. And quite frankly, my husband was ready and willing to come with me. So those were all the reasons.
Well, that was a brave move, and it was a family decision because he's a pharmacist.
Correct.
And so he had to move here too, and he had to take a license test here, and he's going to be—
Which he just passed.
Oh, congratulations to him. And he's going to be at OHSU, I understand?
That's correct.
Well, welcome. We're glad to have you here. How would you compare the two park systems? Very different, I imagine, very large in New York City to Portland.
Well, certainly that's where they differ in terms of size and complexity, but where they're very similar is that urban parks are urban parks. No matter the city, you're still dealing with the same sort of social situations and overpopulation, density, and things of that nature. So in that regard, very, very similar. I like to say that about 80% of what I'm doing here I already knew. So that's the it's not a very, very large learning curve in that regard because there's so many similarities. What's different, of course, is the communities, the neighborhoods, the history of the parks.
What do you think are the important things that the parks bring to urban living?
Well, livability. The benefits of parks are tremendous. Everything from the ecological benefits they bring in terms of clean air, flood mitigation, shade, providing habitat for wildlife, and then beyond that, the recreational benefits, being able to get healthy and fit, and of course, economic development. Parks definitely play a role in making homes and businesses feel more welcoming in a community and help with the value of those homes. And of course, I always talk about respite, right? Like there is something about communing in nature that is just so important to your outlook on life, quite frankly. And to me, it's like therapy, going for a walk in the woods. So there's so many benefits, and those are some of the things that make Portland so livable. There's the beautiful, robust park system.
And let's take a look at what the Portland park system includes. We have more than 200 parks and natural areas. They cover nearly 11,450 acres, 12 pools, 17 community and art centers, so a lot to manage. And you're taking over at a very challenging time. The Parks Department has a $6.2 million budget deficit that preceded your arriving here. How tough is it to walk into that role?
It's been challenging, but I will say that Commissioner Fish and his team have been incredibly supportive of me, as has my senior management team, who've really been sort of carrying the torch, as it were. These are very, very difficult, challenging times, and we're making very difficult decisions that I know are going to impact a lot of both staff and their family, as well as the community. There's a sense of loss that we're dealing with, and we take it very seriously, and our hearts are with everyone who are being impacted.
To give our viewers some history on this deficit, as it's been told to me, is that when Nick Fish took over the Bureau from Amanda Fritz, she had previously fired the Parks Director at that time. And when Nick Fish took over, he hired a new Finance Director, launched this new search for the new Parks Director, and then the Finance Director discovered this structural deficit they were unaware of, this over $6 million deficit, he said was shocking. From what you've learned, how did the Parks Department end up in a hole like this?
Well, I think in the most layman of terms, our costs outstrip our revenue. We're not bringing in as much money through fees, permits, and so on, to counterbalance the cost of doing business, our personnel costs, supplies, materials, utilities. So it really is an accounting issue. And for many years, we patched those holes, and we moved things around, and we got a little creative. And I think years of doing that had put us in this position where what was a tear is now a gap. And you're right. So it was found, I think, in around December. How dire of a situation it was, and we've been working very hard to put forward a budget reduction plan that Council's reviewing now.
And I understand some of it is PERS costs, and also the fee structure. You're trying to keep the fees affordable so people can afford to use the centers, but it's not keeping up. I think, was it 50% of your revenue comes from those fees?
That's correct. So for the overall agency, it's about 27% that we're raising, but for recreation specifically, it's half, yes.
And unlike the federal government, the Bureau, the Parks Bureau, can't just print more money. When Commissioner Fish submits his budget to the mayor, which is in May, he told me he has to give them a balanced budget. So To balance out that $6 million, you are faced with making some tough choices. And what will those choices include?
Well, everything is listed on the CBO website if anyone's interested in terms of the details. But there is both cuts to staff as well as some programming. And we're looking to close some facilities. However, we are requesting some bridge funding to help us look for other business models that might work for some of those facilities and to lessen the blow.
A couple of the facilities that are getting a lot of attention and people feel really strongly about are the Columbia Pool in North Portland and the Sellwood Community Center. And there was a budget forum earlier this month in Northeast Portland where people from all walks of life showed up to rally about their concerns about the budget. Let's listen to what some of them said at that forum.
Columbia Pool is not just a building to me and my neighborhood. It is an opportunity for us to improve the lives of ourselves and our children.
Columbia Pool is a vital resource for the peninsula and all of the residents on it, for all of the institutions on the peninsula that utilize the pool, and people beyond the peninsula.
Our community centers are the heart of our community. If you take that away, we have to drive 6 to 7 miles to another community center. That's unacceptable.
I cannot believe with the amount of wealth in this city that we are here fighting to keep parks open.
Well, you can hear people's passion. What can you tell them? Have any decisions been made about those particular facilities?
No decisions have been made. We're still in the middle of the budget process. The proposed budget, the balanced budget that we submitted to council is still being reviewed. It'll be reviewed by the mayor. But I understand the loss that folks are feeling for all of the facilities, especially Columbia Pool. We are looking, we'll be working with some of the stakeholders who use the pool primarily and try to find some alternative locations or other options for them. But we're also looking into separately and apart of adding a indoor aquatic center at the nearby large community center, which would make it a full-service community center. Now that might be a few years out, but it is something to look forward to in the neighborhood.
What can you do to make sure this doesn't happen in the future, that you end up in another budget hole again?
It's a good question. Many things are happening. One, we're looking at our business models across the board and trying to find efficiencies so that we can deal with the increases that we have in our operating costs in a methodical and strategic way. And the other thing is looking for other sources of revenue in general. I think that we need to be better stewards of our finances and become financially sustainable for the long term, because we don't want to do this every year. It was painful enough. I went through it just once, and I know that the staff and the community have gone through it year after year, and we want to stop that now.
Are you confident you can put the Portland Parks and Rec Department on solid ground?
I am, together with Commissioner Fish, who's just so incredibly dedicated and passionate about parks, and with my really, really talented team. I am confident that we can do that.
Well, it's not all doom and gloom. You just opened a new playground. The Portland Parks and Rec and many partners, neighbors, and friends celebrated the new play areas at the North Park blocks last Saturday. This is funding from the Parks Replacement Bond. Can you tell us a little bit about this playground?
Well, it's a beautiful playground. You can see it's got wonderful elements that are for sort of middle ages. I think we have a couple of older kids that were enjoying it on Saturday, but it's very bright. It meets all ASDM standards, and my understanding is that it replaced a park that hadn't seen investment in many, many years. So it's great for that neighborhood too, because there's really not as many viable play opportunities in that neighborhood in the Pearl District.
And there'll be another one that you're opening, Cooch Park. Playground's coming, and that grand opening is on May 4th.
Yes, very exciting. So the replacement bond, we're about halfway through all of the projects that were selected for replacement, and so these are both projects that came through that.
So some people at home may be saying, well, wait a minute, you're talking about making cuts at the community center and at Sellwood Community Center and the Columbia Pool, and then you're seeing these pictures of these new playgrounds. How does that add up?
Well, I think it's important for the viewers to understand that we're talking about two different budgets, basically. A capital budget is used to build new structures and facilities and parks and playgrounds. And the cuts that we're making are part of our operating budget. So they're two different pots of money. Portland Parks and Recreation has been the proud recipient of a lot of capital funding, and that's great. But we've not had an opportunity to increase our operating funds in the same way.
Some of the projects are in park deficient areas like East and Northeast Portland, and I understand that you really look at parks through an equity lens. Tell us about that.
Sure. So, equity is sort of entrenched in everything that we do, right? It is a part of the dialogue in decisions that we make and so on. But in particular, I think about access. Parks measures access by a half-mile walk criteria. And most Portlanders are, I think, one out of 5 Portland homes are with, 2 out of 5. And then it's much less for East Portland. And so when we're making decisions, we're thinking about access, and we're also thinking about the type of programming and amenities that a particular community needs.
We talk about Cully Park in Northeast as an example of the role the public can play. The Let Us Build Cully Park Coalition raised all the funds to build this 25-acre park. They had a grand opening on 72nd Avenue, just north of Killingsworth last summer. Is that something you think we could see more of? A public-private partnership?
Absolutely. I think that there are many other examples that are going on in Portland, both previous and upcoming. Public-private partnerships are the pillars, quite frankly, of doing this urban park management type work. We can't do it alone, one, and two, the Portland community demands and expects and deserves great parks, and they get involved. And a park that's loved is a park that's cared for. So we welcome the public-private partnerships. Cully is a beautiful park. I've actually been there. I haven't been to all of our parks, but I have been there, and I especially love that park because it is a brownfield remediation. So we took open space that was, otherwise used for negative uses, and we're able to make it into a wonderful park for the community, in a community that really doesn't have much parkland.
And if people want to get involved, you can go to portlandpf.org to the Portland Parks Foundation if you want to get involved in more on the Portland Parks. Let's find out a little bit more about you. We have a picture of you. You started as an urban park ranger on horseback. This is a great photo. Where was this taken?
That's actually at the Jackie Kennedy Onassis Reservoir in Central Park. At the time, actually, I wasn't working for the Rangers, but I was overseeing the Rangers. So,
how did your parks career get started?
Well, in 1997, I had a meal with my then roommate, who was a mounted park enforcement officer, and she had a friend who was a ranger. And she introduced us, and we just were talking about my background and the work that I had done and where I went to school. And he thought, you'd really make a great ranger. Are you working right now? And at the time, actually, I was thinking about going back to graduate school. So I thought, oh, what a great summer job to do, before I go back to school. And it turned out to be the summer job that I never left. So that's how I started in parks, and I just. I moved up the ranks and around the agency for the next 20 years, leaving as a deputy commissioner.
Well, you wore many hats over those 20 years, ascended. What was it like being a woman of color in the park system and breaking all those glass ceilings?
I was lucky that I had some great role models, women that came before me who sort of paved the way. I never really saw it as a barrier. It never occurred to me to think that anything was different for me. But I'm very, very grateful for all of the opportunities that I've been given, and I also never thought that summer that I would end up, that this would be my career. So I'm very happy I took that leap of faith.
Well, I know that your physical fitness and being active is really important to you. You already mentioned how you were just recently on a hike with your staff. You also went on a hike with your staff to Forest Park. We have some pictures of that. Tell us about that experience.
Oh, it was so beautiful. So I had heard about Forest Park. It's actually one of the first things I learned about Portland before moving here, was that it was the largest wooded urban park in the lower 48, and I was like, I gotta go see this, right? So one of the things that I've instituted as a part of my job, I call them Field Day Fridays. They don't happen every Friday, and they're certainly not all day generally. But the idea is that I go out into the field with staff and learn about what they're working on and get a sense. It's a great way for me to learn the system, but also to really understand how the staff are doing and what sort of challenges they're dealing with and what I can do and how I can help them make their jobs a little bit easier. So going to Forest Park was amazing, and just learning so much about the ecology and the restoration work that's been done there. And also the challenges that they have, dogs off leash, the concerns about wildfires, things of that nature.
I'm sure your staff enjoyed going on those field trips. There are a lot of events coming up that Portland Parks and Rec are involved in. Earth Day is on Monday. I know you have a lot of events surrounding that. And then summer is really busy for you. There's something called the Summer Free-for-All, sponsoring activities. We have photos of some of those activities. What does the Summer Free-for-All include?
Well, of course, there's arts and crafts and sports, there's concerts, there's movies, and the best part of Summer Free-for-All is that we provide free lunches to school children at the sites. You know, there's free lunch program all year round in school, but not during the summer. So it's a great opportunity for us to be able to provide that continuity and provide nutritious meals to children.
I heard something like 100,000 lunches you provide?
Yeah. That's about right.
That's really tremendous. You know, bicycling, you've probably noticed, is really big here. I think it is in New York as well. The Parks Bureau intersects with the bicycling community too, such as East Bank Esplanade, the Springwater Corridor, Gateway Green, and they're hoping that you will be an advocate for them. What are your thoughts about bicycling and the parks?
Well, I think everybody uses parks in different ways, and bicycling is indeed very popular here, not only recreationally but also for commuting. It's one of those activities that, you know, we really hope that folks are self-policing, because where there are bikes, there could also be a young child or a dog or whatever the case is, or people who are just learning how to ride bikes. And you know, we're hopeful that folks are mindful and taking care of each other and just being safe out there. We have signage to help guide behavior, but we certainly are not out there in full force enforcing the rules. So we're really hopeful that folks are taking care of each other and riding with care.
Do you see the opportunity for more bicycle trails in some of the park system?
Well, I know that there's a study right now that regarding mountain biking, and I have not seen it, and so I look forward to looking at that. But I think, you know, it's something that we have to think about, because clearly there is a culture of bike riding here, so it always has to be considered when we're doing community engagement around new parks.
What world parks around the world inspire you and your vision for Portland?
I can't really put my finger on one park, but what I will say is there are two types of parks in particular that I really take a lot of, that really inspire me. One, and they're polar opposites, I'll say right off the bat. One is similar to Cully Park, which we described, and I love the idea that we go in and we turn open spaces that, you know, that are otherwise polluted or contaminated and turn them into public open parkland. That to me is just so inspiring, that we could turn you know, a situation that humankind sort of messed up on and make it a better situation.
Director Long, I'm sorry I have to
Sure.
stop you there,
No
because we're
problem.
almost out of time, but I hope you come back because I want to hear more about your vision. Thank you so much. Join us next week when my guest is former Oregon Republican Senator and currently the president of the National Association of Broadcasters, Gordon Smith. We'll see you next week for Straight Talk. Have a great week.